45 kilometers of riparian reserve along Nairobi, Mathare and Ngong River Basin have so far been reclaimed.
Now, according to the Nairobi Rivers Commission, the riparian zones will be transformed into green areas to benefit those living at the riverfronts.
Mashima Kapombe toured sections of Nairobi and Machakos and now reports on the glaring disparity in the implementation of laws for protection of rivers and their environs along the social lines of the rich and the poor.
Hapo wazazi wetu walifanya kuletwa. Wazazi wetu nilikuwa mdogo by that day serikali kipeana hapa si kunyakuliwa ilinyakuliwa.
This is the aftermath of demolitions that occurred in Mathare, Kosovo in the month of May. The result of a process to reclaim the riparian reserve along rivers in Nairobi County following heavy rains that caused flooding, death and destruction.
Mimi nimezalia hapa nikalea watoto wangu hapa.
38-year-old Mary Nyambura owned a 3-story building here. It was her home and source of livelihood.
Tulitolewa kama wanyama, kama umbwa. Hakuna notice yoyote tuliambiwa. Tulistukia tingatinga imeingia na measurement zote wako hapa. Akipima anabomoa. Akipima tingatinga inakanyanga juu. Hakuna mtu alichukua mpaka nguo ya mtoto.
Tuendeni hapa.
52-year-old Peter Chege is at his wit's end. He had just completed a 5-story building and had 16 tenants.
Nyumba iliwekwa alama, yangu ikasemekana imebakisha futi 1.5. Kano pia ije nilituma nyumba yangu igogwe yote ishe. Kuanzia hapo tumeishi maisha ya kulala ije. Mimi hata sina nguvu. Nasikiaga tu tunalala hapa ile baridi natupiga hapa. Sina kwa mbele wala nyuma. Na shida hii mawe hata sikuna mali naweza peleka. Hata sasa wakanipea ruhusa rudisha kanyumba kamoja, sina hata sumuni naweza rudisha.
Mary, Peter and thousands others made lifelong investments here for years, taking loans to sustain themselves and others. They also laid claim to ownership of these lands. A map of Mathare prepared by the Geospatial Data Management Division of Kenya Survey and the Ministry of Lands shows Mathare River snaking its way through the informal settlement. A 30-meter river buffer highlights what should ideally be the riparian reserve, public land that should not be allocated to anybody and where cultivation or development is prohibited. But it seems some of the parcels of land were allocated within the riparian reserve. A closer look at the map shows parcel boundaries indicated in red that are within the riparian reserve. This is a map of another section of Nairobi, also prepared by the Geospatial Data Management Division of Kenya Survey. Nairobi River snakes its way through Korogosho and Dandora settlements. In Dandora, we meet John Karanja, also known as Jontes.
Kulikuwa na gate, juu nakumbuka ilikuwa kando ya mti, juu hata mti ilikuwa imeshield juu.
He leads us to what remains of Dandora Hip Hop City, a building that gave him and hundreds others a new lease of life away from the Dandora dump site.
Ilikuwa once a scavenger for dump site, Dandora dump site, for around 5 years. First I met Juliani, alikama around akanipata dump site, nikiwa na scavenge and all that, akaniambia kuna creative space, ana plan kubai within Dandora. Then akakama kabai Dandora Hip Hop City na nikajipata niko ndani.
Unknown to Jontes and the owner of the building, Kenya hip-hop artist Juliani, the building that was acquired in 2016 sat on the riparian reserve. Jontes recalls the days leading up to the demolition.
Wakapima 30 meters from the river, wakafikisha kwa wall, a certain wall hapa kwetu, wakasema hii ni 24 meters. So inamaanisha gorofa yetu yote inaenda. Kulikuwa kuna polisi akasema hii inaenda, hii kesho inaenda, vitu zianze kutolewa leo. Mko na around 12 ama 20 hours ya kutoa kitu. Kesho asubuhi the whole building inaenda. Na kauliza wao wachache wako wapi? It was on Sunday walikuwa hapo, wakapanda wakaenda hivyo kwa church.
Jontes and others to whom the Dandora Hip Hop City meant so much captured the demolition on camera. Helpless but resigned to their fate.
Ilikuwa pia a space yenye tuna hold meetings za chiefs kukiwa na issue kwa community, tulikuwa na hizo talks. Tulikuwa na women walikuwa na kamingia hapa, tunawasupport kufanya chamas zao. Pia ilikuwa na kids program yenye mimi nilikuwa na head, inaitwa Ndoto Zetu. The kids were coming here after school every Saturdays na Sunday, na pia kila siku wanakuja kufanya homework because this was the only space that we had. Maybe kuna makelele home.
Dandora Hip Hop City was a home that held the dreams and hopes of the community living near the Dandora dump site. But that hope now lies in ruin. A hope they cannot reclaim because even the material left that gives an idea that they can rebuild no longer belongs to them. A church adjacent to the debris partly lies on the demarcated 30-meter riparian reserve. A section of its wall had been marked as the point at which the building should end outside of the riparian reserve. The markings made by WRA have since been wiped and the church building still stands. The government, through the Nairobi Rivers Commission, says 45 kilometers of the river basin along Nairobi, Mathare and Ngong rivers has so far been reclaimed. An exercise that has so far been confined to informal settlements along the riverbanks. In another part of the capital is Runda area along the United Nations Avenue. This map highlights Ruaka River as it snakes its way through several parcels of land. This section shows the boundaries of the allocated parcels stretching into the riparian reserve, with a select few claiming part of the river according to the parcel boundary indicated in red. This map is a section of Runda where Ruaka River flows for approximately 88 kilometers from the edge of this road, that is UN Avenue, to the left of this section of the map is about 33 kilometers and 42 kilometers to the right. Now, the parcels sitting on the riparian reserve of River Ruaka on this side of the map are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. A total of 15. On this other side of the map, there are a total of 19 parcels. Now, a closer look shows developments within the parcels are within the riparian reserve. We reached out to the Nairobi Rivers Commission, the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Lands, but in vain. We wanted to find out why the evictions on demolitions are limited to informal settlements alone and whether the same will be done in other parts of the capital. Those questions remain unanswered. Samuel Orlando is the Executive Director of Pamoja Trust, a non-governmental organization that has been following the evictions and demolitions along the riparian reserve.
Not Nairobi River alone, but there are other rivers that are within Nairobi. So you've got Karen, you've got Kitusuru, you've got Mountain View, you've got areas around Karura, you've got Runda, and many more. And actually, what we established is that majority of the high-income areas have built walls along the riverbanks. So perhaps they were just lucky that they had walls that were concrete. So then the rivers would not flow in. And our theory, I'm not a water expert, but our theory was that the current then starts building from this particular neighborhood, so that by the time it gets to low-income areas like Mathare and others, then the current is very strong and sweeps the settlements. So then in the application of government directive, in the sense of equity, then it should have cut across by what is the generation of this problem, where does it start from, where do the rivers start from, and what happens at the source.
He points out that the manner in which the evictions were done was against the law.
The custodian of public land is the National Land Commission, and the Land Act provides that the National Land Commission should give a 3-month notice, because already we have established that riparian land are public lands, right? The actual day of demolition, then what happens? The affected persons should be allowed to demolish their structures. So that then in the event there are things that they want to salvage, that they want to remove professionally, then they've got that ability.
Dr. Susan Chomba from the World Resources Institute echoes those insights.
The impacts of climate change do not select whether you're poor or you're rich. We've seen in the last flooding, some of the most affected areas are actually some of the high economic areas. People with big homes have been flooded. and there's some function for this vegetation, or what we call the riparian zone. It is supposed to protect the water body from any kind of pollution that comes when you have rainwater, for instance, from the hills, from urban or areas that have human settlement, any kind of sedimentation or pollution, even from agricultural lands, from entering into the water body and therefore keeping our water clean. The second function of a riparian zone is obviously to absorb. It is like a sponge. It absorbs the water that comes from other areas in order to lessen the flood effect on the water body, whether it's a river or it's a lake.
She, however, points out discrepancies in different laws on the riparian reserve.
For instance, you have the Forest Act, you have the Agricultural Act, you have water policies and legislation, and last but not least, you also have the Environmental Management and Coordination Act, EMCA. All of those sort of policies and legal frameworks unfortunately have got different definitions of what a riparian zone should be, and especially in its dimensions. They range from 2 to 6 meters in terms of the minimum, and up to 30 or 50 meters on the maximum. And by the way, let me mention that it's 2 to 50 meters from the highest point of the river. And so again, there's a question of what's the highest point of the river? Is it when the river is a small stream, maybe during drought season, or is it when the river is full, you know?
Those in the architectural sector point out the problem of flooding in the capital, which is likely to reoccur, is not just along riparian reserves.
Majority of the city is straddled by these river and riparian systems. And again, if you look at those maps, you realize that most of these rivers were actually dammed. Yeah, that's why we ended up with Nairobi Dam in Kibra area, to deal with Mbagathi River. We had dams on the Kiambu side near the Windsor to deal with the Ruaka rivers and so on. And these dams were built in colonial times. So basically, you are seeing that even with very unsophisticated planning, there were mechanisms to deal with the flooding that was already happening in the city before the city was even established.
Professor Omenye says lack of development control measures and laxity in implementing guidelines is the cause of these problems. But he and Dr. Chomba agree that criminalizing natural resources is missing the point.
We don't need to run away from the rivers. Part of the reasons why we end up polluting the river, and again, there's a colonial legacy, but our planners have not helped much, is to say, look here, it's criminal to get close to the river because you are actually going to pollute it. And what you're saying, it is actually counterintuitive. And rather than telling people you cannot do this, what we should be telling people is how they can actually, develop in relation to those places.
We need to work with the youth, with the women in the communities, and other members of the community to then have to rebuild those places over time. It's not a quick fix. Let me mention that when I was speaking to some of the communities in areas like Mathare, they told me, Daktari, please, don't come and plant trees or forests here. They are going to be hideouts for gangs. Listen to us. We need the greenery, yes. We need even areas for youth to use in terms of recreation and everything. We need income-generating activities, but they have to be done in a way that is not going to endanger our livelihoods today or in future.
Machakos County was not spared when Mother Nature released her wrath on Kenya with excess rain that led to flooding. The Safaricom pension houses were among those that flooded, as claims were rife that they were built on the riparian reserve. A look at a map of Athi River cutting across Machakos County shows the homes missed the 30-meter riparian reserve by a whisker.
The problem that we have is a development control problem, in the sense that we don't have specific guidelines for people building these sort of areas. And it's not just in Nairobi. It's the same with Kisumu, it's the same with the Mwea area, and all those flood, they're basically plains that flood.
Cairo, the capital city of Egypt, lies along the Nile River. Amsterdam, the capital of Netherlands, is situated near the Amstel River. In fact, the river ends in the city centre and is connected to various canals. River Thames, the longest river in England and second largest in the UK, flows through southern England, most notably through London. This river provides 2/3 of London's drinking water in the total catchment area. And as we ponder on the possibilities, the question that lingers now is whether the laws on the riparian reserve has helped Kenya protect riparian lands or solve the problem of flooding in the future. Mashirima Kapombe, Citizen TV.